Hello, everyone. We're ready to start our second in the series of career stories in astronomy and space. So, welcome everyone. Welcome students. I welcome all the parents. Some of you were here with me last week, and this week we have a very special guest who will be talking to us about his stories and the kind of things he does right now. So I'm very happy to introduce Professor Tarun Souradeep. Welcome.
Thank you, Mila. It's a great pleasure to be among students. As I was mentioning, one of the greatest jobs we have as scientists is to enthuse the next generation, and I spare no occasion on which I can do that. So thanks a lot.
And yes, so Professor Tarun Souradeep is currently the professor and chair of the physics department at ICER, which is Indian Institute of Science Education and Research in Pune. I know previous to that he was at Ayuka, so maybe he'll talk about that too. He's also very well known as being the spokesperson of LIGO India. LIGO, again, he'll talk about that, but that is the Gravitational Wave Astronomy Observatory in India. So we're very excited to hear from him. So let me introduce him first. Professor Tarun Souradeep graduated as an engineer from IIT Kanpur. After a short stint in automobile design, he decided to pursue a PhD in gravitational and cosmology. So that's quite a jump. He has built and led a cosmology subgroup on cosmic microwave background studies. He led the sole Indian group within the international team of the Planck CMB space mission of the European Space Agency. His contribution to science has received international recognition. He has been elected Fellow of the International Society on General Relativity and Gravitation in 2013. He is a co recipient of the Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics 2016, the Gruber Cosmology Prize in 2016 for the recent discovery of gravitational waves. He's also a recipient of a number of awards in India, including the Swarna Jayanti Fellowship, the NASA Scopus Award, the B.M. Birla Prize, Vikram Sarabhai Research Award. He's also a fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Sciences in India. He serves as a spokesperson for the LIGO India Mega Science Project and for the construction and operation of Gravitational Wave Observatory on Indian soil. And again, welcome.
Thank you.
So, so when did you first get interested in astronomy and astrophysics or space physics?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it may have been a subconscious thing in my mind, but I now when I see little children who are already, made up their minds and hearts about space or astronomy, astrophysics, I was probably not like that. I was pretty open, and as I will tell you, I mean, during my undergraduate days, I was part of the astronomy club in IIT Kanpur, but that was more because I actually spent my entire 4 years sampling all possible experiences that one could have apart from the academics
Right.
out there. And so I wouldn't say I had a special knack for astronomy, but or interest in astronomy. I think I got into astronomy largely because I loved the GR course. I happened to take a general relativity course during my undergraduate days. Although I was in the engineering stream, IIT Kanpur had a very, very flexible uh, academic curriculum which allowed you to take many courses outside your discipline.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think that probably is the only connection I know of to astronomy.
So yeah, that's
Yes,
interesting because I mean, in fact, last week I did encourage students to come in from engineering as a background too. So you just stated firsthand that that's how you did it.
right.
So
Yeah.
great.
So actually, what is not probably as much appreciated is astronomy and astrophysics are a subdiscipline of physics, and physics and technology. I mean, science and technology are actually almost indivisible. I mean, somehow here we have this tendency to divide science and engineering as two separate, very separate disciplines. But the best experimental physicists I have come across are extremely good engineers, or their engineering acumen is very high. And there are very, very good engineers who are doing excellent in sciences. So I think these divides are what really keep us from experiencing the broad picture.
Right. So please take us through your educational journey and what pathway you followed uh, to your career and where you are now.
So let me say, I mean, my childhood was in Delhi, and only in retrospect, and now at this age, I started realizing how important uh, and lucky I was to be in a neighborhood where we had the very well-known institutions, the National Physical Laboratory, then the Indian Agricultural Research Institute,
Right.
IARI,
Right.
and
Yeah.
many of the people, my uncles and aunts, were researchers. Although we never talked about research, I think it does somehow affect your childhood. That the whole environment has that in it. So it's not just me. I mean, I think our neighborhood can proudly say, including Mila here, of many, many scientists it has produced, largely in space sciences and astronomy, but also in, genetics and many other disciplines.
Right.
So it probably does matter. The ambience was
Right.
very conducive. I think then I was again very lucky to get a chance to go to IIT Kanpur. And again, that was a real chance because I really did not, I wasn't very keen on going to engineering. In fact, even after getting the IIT, I had actually interviewed for the St. Stephen's Physics. But by the time they announced the results, I had already gone and joined IIT, and somehow it's just the scale of that place, is
Right.
very different. So you realize
Right.
that you are in a good place, and so I stuck to it. So I can start by sharing.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can.
Okay. Let me see if you have the.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, so I mean, I just put together a couple of pictures. I mean, mainly just to guide the discussion. I mean, it's obviously a lot that happened in these 4 years, and I think these
Right.
are really the richest years. I mean, if I were to, send a message to young people out of those years, I mean, the basic mantra I seem to have followed, not very, not as if I followed it because someone told me that's the mantra. I mean, in retrospect, again, if I reconstruct, I think the whole idea was to enrich with as large a variety of experiences, because when I went to IIT Kanpur, I was really spellbound. I mean, there's just so many things to do other than academics. There was a gliding club, there was astronomy club, there was a ham club, all kinds of things. I mean, and uh, and in those days students did pay attention to them. I mean, they were not just things to fill up in your CV. It was more because people were interested. So I have a picture of me getting the degree. I don't have too many pictures from there which are in electronic format. And then there's one I'm quite proud of. This is actually my BTech project. And this is a mechanical simulation of the human heart. So we
Oh,
actually tried
great.
to get the valves and all in place. So again, at that point, we were very surprised that we were very, well appreciated by our faculty for a project, but we never understood why. I mean, because actually, after an hour of this, it started leaking and all kinds of things started happening. But they were pretty appreciative of the ideas that went behind it. So, yeah, so the basic point was to enrich, and I did not really very quickly, I kind of decided where I wanted to be. You need to find your level at which I suggest to students that you find a level where you are comfortably getting the kind of scores that you want to and can live with, and use the rest of your time to enrich yourself.
Right.
Okay, the courses are only a minuscule part of what you can learn during an undergraduate time anywhere. And particularly these institutes which are well endowed are great. But I think that's an important message for students that you decide. I mean, don't force yourself to be a 9.5 pointer, or if it's a big struggle, you'd be happier with the 9 or 8.5, and have a much better life. I think it doesn't matter at all.
Because all these skills of ham radio and gliding and I mean glider club and astronomy club would directly help you in
Yeah,
this
I
kind
mean,
of fields. Right.
I think what I learned there, I think I would never would have learned in my courses. These are life lessons, right? The gliding thing. So I remember one of the
Right.
messages that still sticks in my mind is we had an instructor who used to teach us, and I had taken enough lessons that I could, soon be flying solo. And essentially, he kept used to repeat one line. He says, "In gliding, the biggest challenge is you have only one chance to land."
Right.
Right, and that
Yeah.
is something that I always bear in mind. I mean, this thing behind me, the only nightmare I have is we have only one chance to land it in time.
Right.
Right, because 5 years later it becomes pretty relevant. And and you have to start early, and you have to plan so that you actually arrive there in time.
Right.
Yeah, so that was my undergraduate days. And then I don't have pictures from my few months in automobile design, but that was extremely enjoyable actually. I mean, although it seems as if I left in a half, it wasn't so much. So, I mean, actually, I was working in some place called the Aisha Research Center, where um, essentially we used to design various things for automobile industry. Like, it was actually an R&D center. And yeah, the only problem I had was not many of the things that you designed were taken up further, but that was one part of it. But otherwise there was rich experiences of opening up the engines of various things,
So
seeing.
obviously you liked tinkering, as they call it now,
Yeah, of
with
course.
different
Yeah.
gadgets.
Yeah, I wasn't so great. I mean, I have two brothers who are, in both ways, much more talented than me. And my elder brother in particular was very good at tinkering. So I've watched people tinker, but here I had to tinker as a part of my job. And
Right.
one thing that I learned during my time there was how much difference experience made. Right, so we were these heralded graduates from one of the top engineering colleges of the country. And we realized that after all that we knew much less than a technical guy who actually opened and reassembled the engine every day. Right,
Right.
and there are things that he knew which your courses will never teach you. Right, or
Right.
you can only appreciate it a bit better because you have more learned it. But it's just the vast experience of those people that you realize is so important.
Yeah.
And this is often very underrated in the country. In fact, today I tweeted about a quote from Feynman, which said something to that effect, which says, education is overrated and
Right.
skills are underrated.
Yeah.
Uh, and I
Yeah. So
think
it's
that is,
quite important for us to teach the skills as well, not just,
yes, and,
yeah.
and skills largely come from experience. You
Right.
have to be, getting into the field and doing things. You can't sit in an armchair and absorb skills.
Right. So, yeah. So, what made you go from your job as an automobile engineer to
Yeah, I mean,
cosmology?
I actually wanted to do physics. So all through the 4 years, there was, I was doing these courses without really understanding that I wanted to do it. And very funnily enough, my family seemed to be very convinced, even more convinced than me, that I should not be doing in standard engineering job. And in fact, when after 6 months I decided to resign and come home, I did not even tell home people at home I was going to do that. I came with my farewell gifts, and they thought it was a Christmas gift or something from the company. I said, "No, look, I've resigned," and I mean, there was a huge celebration at home. So my brothers and all were, apparently they were very relieved to see that I finally, uh, you know, uh, took a decision which they thought was right. And that is amazing. And I don't think too many people would have been blessed with such a situation,
Right.
because my next position was not there. And even when I got my position as a graduate student, my salary was less than a third of what I was getting. So it's not the most wise thing to do, but I think it's always, I don't regret it at all. I mean, and particularly 25 years later when we met in our silver jubilee, I had many friends come over and congratulate me on my batchmates. They knew I wanted to do physics, and the
Right.
fact that I could do it, whereas many of them also wanted to do it and did not. I
Yeah.
think
Because
really,
the career track often here is that kids just go into engineering or medical, and that's still the
right.
trend.
No,
But
even a lot of them have gone in to become IAS officers. I
right.
know extremely talented people who would probably be amongst the best scientists or engineers anywhere. Actually, and I'm not saying they have done badly. I mean, and not everyone regrets, but one of them does. I remember calling his son over to Ayuka for a few days for him to experience, because his son had the same dilemma about, IIT versus something else like physics. So it's important to keep your mind open. I know it's a very competitive world out there, so it's easier for me to say, but I do believe it works out.
And so from this, yeah. So what was your next step after
So
this? Where
next
did you
step,
go
I
for?
actually went back to Kanpur, uh, just because there's nothing else. So I just went to IIT Kanpur and asked my faculty members what I could do. And one of the physics faculty was very kind enough to give me a project assistant job, where my job was to go to a lab in the morning, switch on the Van de Graaff generator, and get it running. And then all the PhD students would come and do their experiments and all. And then in the evening, shut it down. And
Right.
there was a sequence in which you had to do all that. And in that meanwhile, I would just sit in the lab and study, because I had, I had to catch up on a lot of the standard physics courses that people had not done, and I had, I had to clear the CSI net exam. That is what people told me, that you need to what is called the CSI net now. I don't remember what it was called. It was a CSI exam for
Right.
getting a junior research fellowship.
Right.
So I was doing that, and I very much enjoyed it, and I learned a lot of things there also. I mean, one of the things I learned, which I don't think it will make me very popular here, is to stay away from video games, because in that lab I had this so-called Dada, a very senior person who was doing his PhD. One day I happened to ask him, "How long have you been doing a PhD?" And he said, "7 years and counting."
Oh my God.
I said, "What happened?" He said, no, this happened, my equipment didn't come, this happened, that happened. So he had a lot of good excuses for it. But all day I used to watch him, play on this little Mac PC, some completely weird game of shooting down parachutes with, a cannon. Okay. And he was totally addicted to it. Right. And I also, when I got a chance, I started playing it. And I realized that it takes only a few days to get addicted to it. And I realized that that is, the worst thing you can get addicted to.
Right.
It's, in my opinion, pretty. Um, I don't know. Maybe I have this thing against these games in the sense that, you know, which
Yeah.
don't seem to really add that much
Right.
compared to what you could have done with that time.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so
So then, yeah. Sorry.
yeah. So where did you go next for your masters and
Oh, this
PhD
I
from
didn't
here?
do a master's at all. I had to do it just as a requirement for my PhD
Right.
much later.
Yeah. Because there are many
So
programs that have that.
yeah, so again, that was just often by chance. So it looks like. So there was one day, one of my professors in physics called me and said, "Oh, you wanted to get into a PhD in physics. Here's a TIFR professor who's visiting. Why don't you meet him?" And it was Professor Anand Krishnan from the National Center for, now what is called the National Center for
Right.
Astrophysics. That is the one which was building GMRT. And so I
Right.
talked to him and he asked me what I had done, and I showed him the courses in general relativity and various courses I had done, particle physics, quantum mechanics. So somehow he judged me. He said, "Oh, you're a theory guy. My theory colleagues will write to you." And
Right.
I get this letter from Ayuka saying, "Would you like to come for an interview?" I interviewed, and Ayuka was just coming up as a new institute. Professor Narendika was setting it up. And then I got through that interview very well. And I remember it was very nice. I mean, people who interviewed me there are extremely revered colleagues of mine now. And, very senior international people were there at that time. I particularly remember Abhay Ashtekar asking me questions in GR, which I think was amazing.
Right.
Uh, then I joined Ayuka. Uh, and, so here's
And just for the students, yeah, do mention what is the full form of
Oh,
Ayuka? What does it
Ayuka
stand?
is an inter-university center for astronomy and astrophysics. It was amongst the first inter-university centers. The first one was this inter-university center for nuclear sciences, which was set up in Delhi. So the idea there was Professor Yashpal, who was then the University Grants Commission chairman of the University Grants Commission, had this dream that since so many universities in India cannot be funded on kind of science,
Right.
why not create inter-university centers where these university people could come and work?
Okay.
So, for example, Ayuka has a core faculty of about 20,
Right.
but has about 120, 30 associates in the university.
Okay.
So in some sense, the institute is much, much bigger
Right.
than its core size,
Right.
because there are these associates who come for 3 months a year to work with you, work in the place. So
Right.
even that's like another 30, 40 researchers. So it's a fairly large setup then.
Right.
So that's in those days, of course, it was just starting, but I think the dreams and aspirations are correct, and we had an extremely good person to make Yashpal's dream come true for astronomy and astrophysics. And Professor Nalika was amazing.
Right.
In fact, I should mention, I don't know whether it's appropriate, but one of the reasons I had a choice between Ayuka and IISc, Indian Institute of Science, which is a much, much well recognized institute by then, to join the Joint Astrophysics program. And since I was in this neighborhood, I went Dr. A.P. Mitra, your dad, Mila, with my father, and to ask what should I do. I have these two choices, and I essentially went with his recommendation. Okay, so I think that
Right.
was
And
amazing.
now, of course, Ayuka is a really big name
Yeah,
in
so
this
it's
field.
amazing how people of that stature can see things so far in the future.
Right.
He just mentioned in one line that if Nadika is setting up a place, it will be good.
Right.
And it was amazing. So it
Yeah.
turned out to be correct.
And for the students, Professor Jayant Narendika is one of the fathers of astrophysics in India, and he's still known as that. And he was one of the founders, right, of Ayuka.
He was the founding director, yes, and he
Right,
was, and even to this date, I mean, he comes into Ayuka every day, few
right,
hours, and is very active. And he's also very active in interacting with students, and that's one thing he inculcated very strongly in us, all the faculty there, but also we were the young students and much more impressionable. So that made
right.
a lasting impression.
Yeah. Do tell us a little bit about your experience at Ayuka and your PhD topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at Ayuka, when I arrived, so this is where things were. So I'm sure not too many people will now. But when I came to Ayuka, all that was there of Ayuka was this board behind which says Ayuka West Wing, a green field there,
Right.
and there was a little shed, and we had but offices in what is now called the National Center for Radio Astrophysics. At that time, it was the GMRT, because they were the ones who were running the Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope.
Right.
And we had amazing guests all through. So we would be just sitting outside, and here's Professor Chandrasekhar, there's Jayant Narendika, who's hidden here, and these are some faculty, postdocs, and students. And this is Professor Radhakrishnan, who was the director of Raman Research Institute.
And Professor Chandrasekhar, of course, is
Of course,
a
yeah.
Nobel laureate in astrophysics, and also the Chandra mission is named after him.
Yeah, the Chandra X-ray satellite is named after him. We had all kind. I mean, we had William Fowler, we had Fred Hoyle, we had, many, many, many leading scientists. Srinivas Kulkarni, who is very well known
Right.
now,
Yeah.
and he's a very young. And we had free access to them. We were just a bunch of 3, 4 graduate students, 5 graduate students at that time,
Okay.
and so we had full time with them, and that was a very rich experience. So as I said, I mean, we just explored. I mean, explored and whatever. And I've started being extremely highbrow theorist. So I worked on problems that many students now, even now, feel excited about, like quantum gravity or quantum cosmology in particular. So my first paper is on quantum cosmology. Then I worked on quantum fields in curved space-time, and with so initially the quantum cosmology part was with Professor Narendika, and then Professor Varun Sahani joined, and I started working on quantum fields in curved space-time. And then it again happened to be the case that the Cosmic Background Explorer mission in the US just
And where,
detected,
and
yeah,
which I actually shared. I don't know if you know that, Tarun, but I was on that project as a support scientist.
yeah, it was. So I
Right.
remember that, yes.
Right.
And so it was quite amazing that given from a new institute in India, we actually wrote a paper which was, uh, when it was published, it was one of 7. But when we put it on the archive, it was one of the earliest works which pointed out that gravitational waves could be contributing to the fluctuations that were seen in the microwave. So to set the story, I mean, you essentially had the microwave background, which was essentially a uniformly lit screen from 1965 to 1992, where everything looked like at the same temperature of about 3 Kelvin. And then suddenly COVID could make out fluctuations at 10 parts per million embedded on it, right? And that started essentially a revolution in cosmology. To I won't be overstating it. It was like a revolution, because cosmology certainly changed from that time, when we knew numbers in cosmology only up to factors of 2, like it could be 50 or 100, to something where we know numbers up at the level of a couple of percent, or of even much less than a percent in some cases. And witnessed this whole thing happening right in front of my eyes in my career, and it's been quite a revelation to me. it also taught me how science really progresses and how much of prior planning goes into it. Um,
So yeah, so can you tell us a little more now? Yeah, so it looks like you were at the right time at the right place. And
yeah.
I mean, obviously, we know now where Ayuka is. It's one of the, the best astrophysics places to go to in India. Um so from here, how did you carry on your career path to where you are now?
Yeah, so essentially the few things, as I said during my uh, PhD, I don't have pictures, but I went to the Canadian Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics for my postdoc. And that again was quite amazing because, so I don't have pictures from there, so I'll get
Yeah,
to
so
this
I
later.
think we didn't have so many digital photos in
Yeah,
that time
exactly. So
on
I
the
have
phone. So yeah,
hard copies of various things, but
right.
again, Canadian Institute of Theoretical Astrophysics is one of the amazing places, which is essentially a postdoc institute. I mean, there were 16 postdocs and six faculty members. So postdocs are supposed to work out for themselves, amongst themselves largely, and it wasn't as if you were under someone. But I worked a lot with Dick Bond, who is one of the leading scientists in cosmic microwave background. And he's an amazing person. I mean, I learned so much, and a lot of my thinking in science is kind of colored by his thoughts. I mean, one thing was, as I said, I was a very hard nosed theorist, and I started appreciating observations, the fact that those are what really tell you what's happening. At the end of the day, you could be the most brilliant theorist, but observations can prove you wrong.
Right.
Whereas observations were harder, observations as well as building instruments that observe. It's much harder. It's a much bigger task, and a task that I think in India, at least in the recent decades, and this is interesting discussions I've had with very senior people. Uh, Probably from the late 70s onwards, we have been kind of trying to skirt around it. We were actually at the helm of the affairs in the early 70s or 60s, where we were doing what would be called frontier experiments. But somehow at some point, we decided to pursue something which is far easier, where the data comes from someone outside with someone else's instrument,
Right.
and you follow it up with a lot of good theory work or analysis work. And I think that has been very detrimental to Indian science. I mean, and if you ask me, what I'm doing now is trying my best in my little way to
Right.
correct that. So I think students should realize, and it's important for students to realize that at the end of the day, what you do with your hands and what you actually produce, there are thoughts you can have, but translating them to something that really leaves a uh, remnant that sustains over years. You give a number that will not change. You can make a quick calculation and say, oh, this might happen. That's fine. That's one way of doing science, but that's not the only way. What remains is when you have done a careful job, you have had a research program which pursued a question, answered it robustly, with experiments or with theory or computations. That's very important to realize. It's that what matters at the end of the day.
So that means they should really develop all these skills of observation as well as computation,
Yeah.
creating of theory. So actually, they should get into all of these
Yeah, I mean,
fields.
all aspects. I mean, there is no aspect in science or technology that is greater or lesser than the others. Okay, again, these are lessons you learn. So, for example, when LIGO announced its discovery, and many of us are part of the Breakthrough Award. See, many of the people who are part of the Breakthrough Awards are engineers who essentially know very little of general relativity.
Right, but
For
they are
them, their
involved in
life is
building.
this thin wires which are suspending the 40-kilogram mirrors.
Right,
But they know that so well that if they were not there, this experiment would not happen.
right.
So you have to realize that it takes so many people to actually achieve what is the apex. And what we miss is, in anything, there's a pyramid. Okay, and we tend to only think of towers.
Right.
We think, oh, there's this great guy out there, but the
Yeah.
question is how much of the support is there.
Right.
Very thin. Moment this guy think, and then the whole collapses. But if you have a pyramid, of course the top of the pyramid are those Nobel laureates, but if you
Right.
have that, you will have sustained number of Nobel laureates coming up, right? And when we keep asking this question everywhere, this is what is happening. So if you want uh, kid listening, you should realize that it's doable. It's just well within our hands, and it requires just a rethinking of how we look at this enterprise.
Right. So, will you tell us a little bit more about gravitational wave astronomy and what you're doing
Yeah,
with
so
that
let
right now?
me let me just say that initially my time for the first 10 years was largely doing cosmic microwave background, as I said, Planck and WMAP and various leading experiments. But that still, it was
And
data
this was
which was
mostly at IUCA.
at
Is that
IUCA. And all I wanted to say is, so the first phase was absorbing as much as I could.
right?
And this phase, I could give out as much. So I had lots of students all through my career. I enjoyed working with undergraduates, graduates. So many of them are undergraduates and graduate students of mine, and some probably postdocs.
And of course, this is also showing the students that part of your being a faculty is the fun of working with students
Yes.
and guiding them in research.
Yeah, they're part of, basically they're family to me. So if you ever wonder what keeps me happy, it's the pride that when I see many of them excelling in their work, going on further, and many of them have. And this is what my life was. I mean, I was trying to pass on whatever I learned to
Right.
this generation. And then the other part of my life was to build international cooperation. This is again something that we need to work harder on. But it was clear to me during my postdoc days that the reason that people outside seem to do much better, one of the biggest reasons is they know how to cooperate much faster. The collaborations, so-called collaborations, are built, in within days and weeks. If something exciting happens, you find the best mathematicians, best physicists, best chemists. They get together on the problem very quickly. In India, that is very, very lacking.
Right.
So you should learn how to get together, and that is something I did. And this is just a picture of one of the conferences where I think it highlights the whole spectrum of people. So we had extremely top level people who are, many of them are, two of them are Nobel laureates, Kip Thorne and Jim Peebles.
People. Right.
And this is Dick Bond, my mentor, a postdoctoral mentor, Francois Boucher, a long-term collaborator who helped me get into Planck and all. Dave Reitz is the director of LIGO. And then there's this whole bunch of Indian and foreign things. The whole thing is to bring people to, oh, this is John Ellis, a very famous person in
Right.
particle physics. So the whole thing is that, first of all, there are no divisions. There are no cosmologists, particle physicists, astronomers. It's all one thing of doing, this science. And that was one of the mantras I followed very routinely. Many attempts to build collaborations across the globe, and that led to this LIGO India project. So essentially, in mid about 2007 8, I was at that time just nearing my 40s, and uh, 2000, everyone sort of had the same thing, dream big, do big things. And I actually took them very seriously. I said, okay, fine, so what can we do? And the field of cosmic microwave background, by that time or even much earlier when I came back in 2000, had already matured so much that for a country which had not started it at all, I was the only graduate student, me and maybe two more are the only card holding cosmic microwave background scientists produced in India. Uh, you cannot chase a dream like that. So I was looking for something that would mature in 10 years time. And just like Kobe discovery, something would be happening. And I spotted gravitational waves as that field. And I knew about gravitational waves
Right.
because IUCA had a group, the only of the two active groups in India. But IUCA had one of them under Sanjeev Dhurandhar, and I knew what was involved. As a student, I had learned quite a bit of it. And I started pursuing that. So we started building this plan of bringing the entire, a large number of people together. So we built what is an informal consortium called Indigo, Indian Initiative in Gravitational Wave Observations. And the observations was important. So we did not just want to do theory and data analysis. We wanted to get into experiments and be part of experiments. And we were planning to, and we brought in experimental people into the fold. And since it was a completely informal setting, we didn't have this institutional politics and all kinds of issues that come with setting up something formal. And I did not put the Indigo Lab logo, but for 10 years that was a thing that I was pushing for till we actually had the LIGO India proposal made by an informal consortium. I keep repeating that to everyone. The proposal was not submitted by Institute XYZ. It was as if it was a almost like a joke. I mean, there are three, four scientists listed, and then
Right.
a whole list of people. And it was an informal consortium which made a bid for a mega science project, and we managed it. So that was the story. And the story now is we try to build up the community. So here are these. Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Yeah, so there is this whole group from Indian researchers with experts from abroad brought together in various meetings. We had series of meetings like that. Then here are the four coordinators. I, of course, after I moved to ISA, I'm no longer the coordinator from IUCA.
Okay.
But at that time, this is the pillar where this marks the center of the LIGO India. LIGO India is two laser arms
Right.
meeting, and this is where the beam splitter position is.
Okay.
So four of us kind of touching it. This is while we were searching for the site, the director, deputy director. This is some NSF, senior NSF official, and chief scientist of LIGO. We had scoured the country. Again, just to tell you repeatedly how much hard work goes into it. I spent 5 years, with a group of people with very limited funds because we didn't have a project. We followed up about 40 sites across the country, almost everywhere, and then homed on to this site that we are now,
Because the site has to be pretty important in terms of very less disturbance and being a little remote and all that.
yeah, it's got very conflicting requirements. So you had to be away from road, railway, airports, all kinds of restrictions. You have to be also away from the sea coast. Uh, and then on the other hand, you will have to set up a premier kind of scientific enterprise there. So it can't be that remote,
Right.
can't be that, they have to be reasonable travel
Transport.
distance from some lab or the other.
Right.
And so it was very tough. And I think we finally have homed on to a very, very good site. Who's and also the ground characteristics, the vibration on the ground, which for example, in the Himalayas is terrible, right? Because
Okay.
it's a very seismic zone.
Right.
We we are very lucky in India. Later, it turned out that the Deccan Plateau is one of the quietest places geophysically on Earth, because it's a huge landmass which has come out of one single major volcanic eruption. It actually has very little of that noise. We are a factor of few, I think five or more, better at the relevant frequencies than the better of the US sites. So it's actually very lucky that we could do that in India. So this is, as I said, the one behind me is a full zoom with all the arms. This is the central station. you can see the scale of it. This is 20 meters building, single, story. Okay, so that's the
Right.
scale of the vacuum chambers and everything that will sit inside. Okay, and then have cranes to move up things around, and then this is the kind of size. So I feel the first time I came and saw GMRT, it was being built, and the scale baffled me, right? I mean, and then I went and saw Fermilab and the size of the detectors. I realized, I was just immediately smitten by that whole concept of what kind of scientific apparatus people dared to build
Right.
to do frontier science, right? And also some of the satellites that, what happens in those satellites like Planck, or as you get involved, you realize where the excitement is,
Right.
right? And I mean, maybe still for many people, it would be in, certain exotic areas, but, to me, it is more in these very uh, applicable and very nice things where you see something right standing right in front of you.
So I think we'll take the. I mean, I'll ask you the last question from my side, and then maybe we'll go ahead to uh, questions from the students.
Yeah.
So, everybody interested in gravitational wave astronomy, remember that I'm going to tap him again to
Mm.
talk a bit more about that. So, I know you joined ICER recently. Would you just like to talk about what ICER is known for and what you're doing there?
Okay, ICER is, I mean, to put it simply, it is the equivalent of IITs. They are kind of institutions set up as act of parliament to do science, and they do basically all of them do the four major sciences: physics, chemistry, biology, maths. But some of them have we have earth and climate science, and we have data science coming up.
Right.
And but then those are but this is kind of again very competitive, and we take from both the JE and this thing.
Right.
So extremely strong undergraduate training, but the emphasis is on research. So
Okay.
faculty is actually evaluated on their research performance,
Okay.
and they teach it. So it's very close to what exists in the US, to my understanding, in the US university systems,
And
where
this is a joint bachelor's and master's,
yeah,
right?
it's a joint bachelor's and master's. So it's a 5-year program. And I think they have a very strong grounding. I mean, every
Right.
grounding, and different ISAs have different emphasis. ISA Pune has emphasized breadth, in the sense that the first 2 years or first 1.5 years, you get exposed to all the sciences. Okay, you don't specialize, and that may have its drawbacks, but that has very strong, at least from my own personal perspective, that's extremely important, because that's what allowed me to move from engineering to physics. If we didn't have
Right.
a broad curriculum in IIT, I wouldn't have managed it.
Right. So I think we have a lot of questions. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing all this, your background. And
So
I'm going to now request Arjun to come back online and uh, just discuss what are the questions that students have been bringing up on the YouTube chat.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, sir, Tarun sir. So it was very nice hearing you about your career. So students were also very interested, and they have a lot of questions
yeah, yes.
about your for you. So let me just start by asking Visha. Wait. So the first question we have is from Dia Nathani. She says that, can you please tell what is the difference between astronomy and astrophysics? Okay.
Okay. So astrophysics is studying the physics of astronomical objects. Astronomy is more of kind of classifying objects and finding out uh, the more of observations and knowing where things are in the universe. And astrophysics is trying to uncover the physical processes that underlie it.
Yeah. Okay. So, sir, the next question we have is from all right. So the next question we have is okay. So it says homies. So he says, sir, in your research of gravitational waves, have you found out about the particle graviton?
No, no. So we are looking at classical waves. So just like when when you generate electromagnetic wave in a dipole antenna, it's the wave nature that is dominantly there. We don't see, and we see photons only in experiments where we are dealing with something like the photoelectric effect. So gravitational waves that we observed are classical waves. We are not looking at gravitons. But
Okay.
if you, I mean, if there, I mean, there are gravitons, then these are such huge numbers of gravitons together that you can't really see them as individual particles. You see only their wave behavior.
Hmm. Yeah. So the next question is from Deeba Beg. She says, Tarun sir, what is the most memorable moment in your career? Okay.
There are many memorable moments. I think, I was quite excited when probably in September, the first gravitational waves were detected. I mean, not because I was personally very deeply involved with that, but just the fact that about 10 years before that, I had kind of guessed that this is an area which will take off, and I had started pursuing that. So it was, in some sense, I felt a vindication of, gamble well made.
Hmm. Yeah. So the next question we have is
I mean,
from
I'd like to add there that the
okay,
gravitational
yeah,
wave
please.
astronomy did go on to win the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
And which year was that in?
2017.
Right, recently. So yeah, so that must have been a validation of all the kind of work you were doing.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was essentially, I think, this feeling that I always had of trying to catch a field when it's just starting.
right,
And a field which many fields do start and don't go anywhere. So, it's always a risk.
right.
Um,
Yes.
Here
So
it.
so Vishal Mehta, he is asking, so is aerospace and aeronautical engineering is there in IIT?
Uh, I think IIT Kanpur has a aeronautical, I think it's called aerospace department or aeronautical engineering. Yes, they are there. I mean, IITs have them. Some of the IITs have them. You have to look them up. I'm not completely offhand. I won't know which ones. But also one place which has it and may not be as known is Indian Institute for Space Technology in Trivandrum. Okay, and that is an amazing place to be in. You should really think because that's a direct connection to ISRO,
Right.
and really challenging things can be done if you graduate from there, and very good students join there.
And one of my speakers in the webinar series is somebody from there. So maybe the students will hear more about that at that time.
Yeah. So there is one more student, I can see her name, but she is asking that uh, who is your biggest inspiration?
Uh, I have not been into that much of hero worship. I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, I'm not saying that's good or bad, uh, but yes, people do have had big influences in my life. I mentioned my postdoctoral advisor, Dick Bond, for various reasons. But yes, and then many people I met, and some of them are very different. I mean, some of the people who have influenced me are not really as well known or great, but nevertheless, they made a big impact on how I look at science and work on in science. Yeah.
All right, sir. So now I have a very interesting question from Karthik Bejoy. He's asking, sir, how can we save Earth from very big asteroids? One could probably hit us by 2027.
Um, I'm not a great expert on it, but it is true that this worry has helped astronomy in many ways. So there are telescopes set up dedicated near Earth objects like the Pan stars and various things. So I do think one should take the threat seriously. On the other hand, we should not have nightmares about it. It is, the probabilities are not that high that it will happen in the next 100 years or so. But the fact that as humanity we should be prepared is true. How best to do it, I would leave it to the experts. I mean, people have talked about deflecting it with nuclear explosions and things like that. But whether it works or does things, turns things worse with many splinters coming and hitting you. You should imagine the main thing we forget is the speeds at which these astronomical objects are moving. Earth is moving in the solar system at 30 kilometers per second. That's a speed we don't even encounter. Anything which is moving fast relative to Earth is actually moving extremely fast and hitting us. So these are enormous events if they happen. Very powerful, yes. But we shouldn't, I think these are interesting things, but I think people will figure out how to deal with them. I would not worry so much. At least I don't personally worry about it that much.
So
Sorry,
Arjun,
you're mute.
you're also on mute right now.
For telling me, ma'am.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I was saying that sometimes these events are so fast. We don't even notice from a few of the asteroids until after they have passed our orbit. So yes, even
Yeah.
predicting them is also a very tough challenge, rather than stopping them.
Yeah, it is challenge, and it's also remarkable that human ingenuity can do that now, and
Yes.
and we have computational tools that allow us to do that,
Yes.
and it requires a huge. I mean, I have some idea of what it takes to have these codes running, which can follow something for a long time, because there are a lot of perturbations to the orbits, and you need to correct for them, and so it is a very, very rich science in itself, and I appreciate
Yes.
it for the science. Uh, and it is true that I think when we have better computational abilities and all that, I think this is not one of the problems we will not be able to contend with
Hmm.
on the timescales on which this really probably going to happen, right? Chances of that. There are more obvious problems. Let me be a little bit of an activist, but
Yes.
climate change is happening. It's
Right.
more
Yeah.
certain than asteroid hitting us.
Right.
I think if you want to have nightmares, you should have nightmares
Right.
about climate change
Yes.
And
than
maybe we
about
can take
asteroid hitting.
action now against it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. But just to point out that we do guide students in a project called IASC, where our students analyze data from the Pan-STARRS telescope
Wonderful.
and look for asteroids through moving images. So we
Right.
did do it this summer. So we'll be guiding a whole bunch of other students on that next year again.
So I should also
Yeah.
point out this Professor Varun Bhalerao in IIT
Right.
Bombay.
Yeah, I know his
He
name.
is really, he is like a live wire kind of a guy. He's
Right.
amazing. So he's got these young students hunting for asteroids and doing various things. So, people should
Yeah.
look for
Yeah.
opportunities to work with him. He's very inspiring.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out. I'll talk to him about
He's
what we
just
can do with
fantastic.
students.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's a fantastic guy.
right.
Yeah.
So is this the last question, Arjun? One more question
Yeah.
we can take?
Okay. Okay. So so yeah,
There are
so
too
what
many
would be the
questions.
least? Yeah, there are too many questions. So I'll just take
Okay.
one. Let's say Dhanaj Jha, he's asking, what would be the least magnitude waves LIGO India could measure?
Okay. So this would be, computed in terms of strain, which is change in length over length. So that I think we will get down to very close to 10 to the minus 23. Okay.
Okay.
And maybe it will get improved further, because by the time we get on board, we would have certain upgrades done together with the other LIGO detectors. And so that is the ballpark figure I can give you. So which means you're actually looking at motions of mirrors at the level of 10 to the minus 20 meters. That's 4 orders of magnitude smaller than the size of a nucleus.
Yes. So
and that
that's
and that is why the technology became so important of how the LIGO is constructed and where it is based and the vacuum chamber and things like that, right?
Right.
So
Every bit of it has to work at the extreme of its, abilities. I mean, the vacuum technologists control everyone. Everyone has to stretch it to the best possible limits to get to what you want.
yeah. So I guess we are through with the questions. There are still many questions that the student
So
are asking, but
I'll just ask him one more that I
yeah,
spot
sure.
that is directly relevant to him, which is Agastya Iyer says, what's the difference between cosmology and astronomy?
Okay. Cosmology is essentially a collective kind of understanding of all the astronomical objects together. Okay. Now, typically, cosmology now has been limited to looking at scales much bigger than our own galaxies, right?
Right.
So, galaxies are like point objects there. Just like when I'm looking at the airflow in a room, through the motion of dust particles. I don't care about the structure of the dust particles. I look at the collective motion of dust particles. So cosmology is at that level of coarseness, understanding the global picture of how space-time evolves in the universe. So it's answering, how the universe evolved. And astronomy is cosmology is a part of astronomy and astrophysics,
Right.
which deals with this.
Right.
Astronomy is, of course, we need to know where the galaxies are, you know maybe divide them into different classes for different things, but that is more of measurements of where things are, how they look, what are their properties. But cosmology is trying to put it all together into a unified picture of how things evolved from what we think was the universe in the past and what would be the universe in the future,
Yeah.
understanding what we see in the universe now, in
Right.
just explaining that.
So thanks, Professor Souradeep, for explaining so many different facets of how to get into an astronomy career. And your background is very different. You came in from engineering, so I hope a lot of students who are interested in going into engineering first remember that you can easily come from that background also. So thanks for giving us so much ideas about gravitational wave astronomy and these premier institutes, uh, IUCA especially. Uh, so I hope
Okay,
the
thank you very
students
much. I
enjoyed it.
enjoyed it. I hope students also enjoyed it. I hope.
Yes,
Uh,
students enjoyed it a lot, sir. So they
okay,
were
thank
asking a
you.
lot of questions and they really liked
Thank
it.
you.
So we also liked having you here. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Arjun.
Thank you,
Okay,
Arjun.
thank you, Mila.
Okay, so
Okay.
just want to point out to students that next week on 17th, we have the other end of the spectrum. We have a guest. We have a PhD student. So we'll hear of astronomy from a PhD student's background. So please join me again on 17th at the same time. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay, so
And
are we
we'll see the
offline?
student next time. Arjun, please take us offline now.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, ma'am. So I have ended the stream. So thank you very much, sir.